I didn't think a sarcastic comment could change everything, but that night, one single line I tossed out without thinking became the fuse for the cruelest humiliation I've ever experienced. It was a Thursday evening, and nothing about the day had been unusual. I came home late from work, damp from the drizzle outside, my bag heavy on my shoulder and my hair clinging to my cheeks. The apartment felt stale, the kind of air that hangs when windows have been shut for too long. I could hear the faint sound of a sports announcer through Liam's phone speaker before I even turned the corner into the living room. There he was, sprawled on the couch like a fixture, one sock half off his foot, scrolling aimlessly while a pile of dishes in the sink looked ready to collapse. It was the same scene that had been replaying for months, me coming home to a mess, him acting like he didn't notice it. I dropped my bag by the door, my patience already thin. I started picking up plates from the coffee table, stacking them just to have some control over the chaos. Every clink of ceramic felt like a statement, every step to the kitchen another reminder that I was the only one doing anything to keep the place livable. Liam didn't move. He didn't offer to help. He just kept scrolling, smirking faintly at something on his screen. That smirk was the last straw. Without thinking, I said it. Maybe your old roommate should replace you. At least then I wouldn't have to clean up after him. The words hung in the air heavier than I expected. He didn't respond. No sarcastic comeback, no lazy chuckle. Just a slow, deliberate glance in my direction, his expression unreadable, as if he were mentally noting every word. Then he looked back down at his phone like nothing had happened. I told myself he was just sulking, that he'd forget about it after a couple of days like he always did when we fought. The problem was, I knew exactly how it must have landed. Evan, his old roommate, was always the ghost in the room between us. Taller than Liam, cleaner, more disciplined. He had this quiet confidence that made people notice him without him trying. I'd met him a handful of times before Liam and I moved in together, and while I never crossed a line, I'd noticed the way he carried himself. He was the kind of man who'd fold a blanket neatly after using it, whose laundry never sat unfolded for days. Liam hated that comparison, even though it was mostly in his own head. And here I was, confirming his worst suspicion, that maybe I had thought about it, that maybe I'd imagined what it would be like if someone else took his place. I told myself it was just a jab, one of those petty little barbs couples throw at each other in the middle of an argument. But deep down, I knew there was truth in it. I had noticed Evan. I had thought about how different things might feel. And Liam, he was too perceptive not to see it in the way I said it. He didn't bring it up that night. He didn't yell, didn't slam doors. But the silence was sharper than any fight we'd ever had. It was the kind of silence that meant something was coming, and I was too arrogant to realize it. At the time, I thought the worst that could happen was a few cold days between us before we made up. I didn't realize I'd just handed him the perfect excuse to tear my life apart in a way that would leave me standing in my own hallway, watching another man carry his life into my apartment while mine was quietly pushed out. I didn't realize that in that one offhand comment, I had set myself up for a punishment that would be calculated, deliberate, and public. And when it finally came, I wouldn't even be able to say I didn't deserve it, not entirely. After that night, something in the air between us shifted. It wasn't obvious at first. There was no shouting match, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, Liam became quiet. Not the sulky kind of quiet I was used to, but something colder, more deliberate. He started moving differently in the apartment, as if mapping the space with new intent. He'd glance at me a second too long before heading into another room, the kind of look you give when you're filing away a plan. The morning after the comment, he was gone before I woke up. No note, no text. Just his side of the bed cold and the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. It wasn't unusual for him to leave early for work, but the absence felt heavier this time. That day turned into 3 more without much interaction. Meals weren't shared, conversations were limited to a flat yeah or no. And when he did speak, It was with a politeness so forced it felt like mockery. It's strange. You can live with someone, see them every day, and still not notice the ground shifting beneath you until it cracks open. I told myself he was just being immature, punishing me with silence because I'd bruised his ego. But underneath that dismissal was an unease I couldn't quite name. I didn't know it then, but every quiet moment, every calm, was him laying brick after brick for something I wouldn't be able to undo. I should have seen the warning signs. He started spending more nights out, claiming he was catching up with old friends or staying late at work. He began bringing in new boxes under the guise of sorting through old stuff. I didn't pay much attention, assuming they were things from his storage unit. But one evening, I noticed a black duffel bag in the corner of the bedroom. It wasn't his. I'd seen it before. Evan had used it the last time he'd visited. That's when my mind started playing tricks on me. I thought maybe Liam had bumped into him. Maybe they were reconnecting. It wouldn't be strange. They'd lived together for years before me. But something about the way the bag just sat there, unmentioned, gnawed at me. I asked about it once, casually, while folding laundry. Liam barely looked up, saying it was extra gym stuff. The answer was too quick, too smooth. And then came the first real crack, a small one, but enough to hint at the flood behind it. I got home early from work one Wednesday and found the bedroom door locked. Liam never locked it. I knocked, and after a pause, he opened it just enough to slip out, pulling it shut behind him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The bed behind him was perfectly made, but I caught a glimpse of something unfamiliar on the dresser. A pair of headphones I didn't recognize. In hindsight, I realized he was testing me, seeing how much he could slip past before I started asking questions. And I failed every test. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just Liam being Liam. Private, moody, impossible to read. But in truth, I was willfully ignoring the unease, because facing it meant facing the fact that my comment about Evan wasn't just a petty insult. It had been an admission, a dangerous one. The thing is, I did notice Evan. From the very first time we met, there was something about him that made me curious. It wasn't just the way he looked, though that didn't hurt. It was the calm, the easy way he carried himself, the quiet competence that made him seem like he was always one step ahead. Liam was charming in a messy, impulsive way, but Evan was different. I told myself it was harmless to think about, that everyone has passing thoughts like that. But words have a way of pulling thoughts into the light, and mine had landed right in Liam's lap, fully formed. What I didn't know was that Liam had already decided how he was going to use it. I thought I'd crossed a line I could step back from. He knew I'd handed him a weapon, and slowly, methodically, he was going to show me what it felt like to be replaced, not in some abstract, emotional sense, but physically, tangibly, right in front of me. He was going to make me watch my own suggestion come to life, until I couldn't tell if I was angry at him for doing it or at myself for giving him the idea in the first place. Looking back now, I realized the revenge started the very moment I made that comment. Everything after was just him winding the spring tighter and tighter, waiting for the day he could let it snap. And I was too wrapped up in my own self-righteousness to see that the countdown had already begun. It was a Saturday morning, grey, wet, and cold enough that the windows had a thin fog clinging to them. I'd planned to do nothing all day. My hair was a mess. I was wearing the oldest sweater I owned, and I'd just sat down with a mug of coffee when I heard heavy thuds echoing in the hallway. At first, I thought it was a neighbour moving furniture. But the sounds grew louder, closer, the scrape of something being dragged across the floor, the metallic rattle of a toolbox, the deep thump of a box dropped too hard. I opened the door just enough to peek out, and my stomach dropped. Liam was there. Not just him, Evan too. They were both carrying large boxes up the stairs, moving with a rhythm that made it clear this wasn't just a casual visit. Evan had a mattress balanced against his shoulder, plastic still clinging to the corners. Liam was grinning. Not a happy grin, but that smug, slow curve of his mouth that said, "You're about to learn something." Before I could process it, they walked right past me without a word, into my apartment. Evan went straight to the bedroom, while Liam disappeared into the kitchen to set something down. I stood there frozen, my coffee cooling in my hand, my brain scrambling for an explanation that didn't make me sound like a fool. The first shock hit when I went to follow Evan into the bedroom and found the door locked. My own bedroom. I twisted the handle twice, 3 times, my pulse rising with each click of the latch. From the other side, I heard movement. Boxes sliding, dresser drawers opening, the unmistakable sound of someone unpacking. I turned to Liam. He leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me with the lazy satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. On the table next to him was a stack of papers, rental agreement copies, an envelope with my landlord's handwriting, and a set of keys I'd never seen before. That's when it clicked. He'd gone behind my back, talked to the landlord, convinced him there was a mutual agreement for Evan to take over the room. Somehow, he'd managed to make it all look official. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. This wasn't some overnight stunt. He'd been planning it, step by step, while I was still convincing myself his silence was just moodiness. He'd involved Evan, the landlord, and God knows who else, just to make sure I couldn't fight it. I tried to argue, but every word tasted useless. The bedroom wasn't just physically locked. The entire situation was sealed tight. Even if I wanted to get the landlord to reverse it, I knew how it would look. A bitter ex, trying to sabotage a perfectly reasonable new tenant. And the worst part? It was the exact scenario I'd flippantly suggested weeks ago. Evan could replace you. Well, here he was. The rest of that day blurred into a loop of small humiliations. Evan's shoes by the door, his gym bag on the couch, his phone charging in the kitchen. Little markers of how quickly someone else could claim a space that had once been mine. Every time I walked past the locked bedroom, I felt a fresh surge of heat under my skin. By evening, my living room looked less like my home, and more like a waiting area I was temporarily allowed to sit in. Evan came and went freely, smiling politely, but saying nothing, as if silence made it easier to pretend I wasn't standing there watching my own erasure. Liam, on the other hand, made a point to linger, to sit where I could see him, leaning back in my chair like he owned the place. It was the first time I truly understood that he wasn't just getting revenge. He was turning my life into a stage play, and I was the audience forced to watch the scenes he'd written for me. Every box Evan unpacked was a line in the script. Every locked door was a cue, and the curtain wasn't coming down anytime soon. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the noise, though there was plenty of it, but because I kept replaying that stupid comment in my head. I'd said it to win an argument. I'd said it to sting him. And now I was realizing the truth I'd been avoiding. A part of me had meant it. That was the real punishment, not just losing my room, but seeing the proof that my carelessness had teeth, and they were sharp enough to cut me down to nothing. I woke up on the couch with my neck twisted at a sharp angle, the thin blanket I'd grabbed barely covering my knees. The morning light was pale and flat, filtering through the blinds in narrow strips. For a moment, I didn't remember why I was here instead of in my bed. Then I heard it, the low, deep laugh from behind the locked door, Evan's laugh, followed by the creak of the bed frame as he moved around my old room like it was his. It wasn't just the sound of someone living in that space that got to me. It was how normal it already seemed. Less than 24 hours, and my bedroom had accepted a new owner like I'd never been there. The air felt different. Even from the hallway, I could smell his cologne mixing with the faint scent of laundry detergent. My old life was vanishing, one sensory detail at a time. I went into the kitchen to make coffee, trying to pretend this was still my apartment. The mugs were where I'd left them, the counters clean, but the illusion cracked when I saw Evan's blender on the counter. His protein powder was lined up neatly next to the stove, right where my tea tins used to be. A bright orange post-it with his handwriting, "Buy more almond milk," was stuck to the fridge. My fridge. The door opened and Liam walked in without knocking, like he owned the place. He didn't say good morning. He didn't say anything at all. He just dropped a grocery bag on the counter, pulled out a carton of eggs, and started cooking. The way he moved made it clear I was the extra here, not him. I sat at the far end of the couch, nursing my coffee while Evan came out of the bedroom in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked at me with the polite, distant expression people give to strangers on a bus. Not hostility, not warmth, just the acknowledgement that we occupied the same space by accident. The humiliation was physical by then. It sat heavy in my chest and crept up into my throat. I tried scrolling through my phone to distract myself, but it didn't work. My notifications were already filling with messages from friends. Are you and Liam done? Why is Evan moving into your place? Girl, what is this video? That last one stopped me cold. I opened it and my stomach turned. Someone had filmed me standing in the doorway the day before, coffee in hand, watching Evan and Liam carry in the mattress. The caption across the video read, "When your upgrade arrives." It was already making the rounds in our shared friend circles. Some were laughing, some were asking if I'd cheated, but none of them were defending me. That was when I realized Liam had planned this part too. He hadn't just wanted to take my space, he wanted to own the story. The way it was spreading, I could already see how it would play out. I'd be the petty, jealous ex who got replaced by someone better, the one who couldn't handle what she'd wished for. The truth, that it had all started as a drunken, reckless joke, wasn't going to matter. By midday, the apartment didn't feel like mine at all. Evan had friends over. They sat in the living room with him, taking up the couch I'd been trying to hide on. I ended up in the corner chair, surrounded by strangers, listening to them talk about gym schedules and game nights like I wasn't even there. Every now and then, someone's eyes would flick toward me with the quick, subtle curiosity of a person looking at a rumor in real life. The second night was worse. I'd managed to doze off around midnight when I was jolted awake by loud music from the bedroom. Not aggressive, just upbeat, cheerful, like a party was happening on the other side of the door. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling my teeth clench tighter with every bass note. It was the most intimate kind of invasion, not physical harm, but the slow erosion of every boundary I had. At some point in those 2 days, the humiliation stopped feeling sharp and started sinking in like cold water. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped trying to move around the apartment like I belonged there. Instead, I found myself tiptoeing, keeping quiet, almost apologizing with my body language for taking up space in what had once been my home. When Liam came by again, he sat in the kitchen with Evan for nearly an hour, talking just loudly enough for me to hear fragments. Jokes about timing and settling in. Every laugh felt like another nail in the coffin of whatever version of my life had existed before this. By the end of the second day, I understood that this wasn't temporary. Liam wasn't going to get bored and leave. Evan wasn't going to apologize or step aside. And I wasn't going to get my room or my dignity back. This was my life now, and the only way out was to burn what was left of it and walk away with nothing. The thought terrified me, but worse than that, it made a strange kind of sense. On the third morning, I woke up to the sound of furniture being moved. It was the deep, scraping thud of something heavy dragging across the floor. My old dresser. The one I had bought second-hand and refinished myself, sanding every drawer, painting the handles gold. I stayed still for a minute, hoping I'd imagined it. But then I heard Evan's voice calling to one of his friends, telling them to set it against the far wall, because it fit better there. That was it. Not the video, not the laughter, not even Liam's smug appearances. It was the sound of someone deciding where my things belonged, without me. That was the moment I knew I couldn't do this one more day. I didn't announce I was leaving. I didn't want to give Liam the satisfaction of seeing me pack. Instead, I moved silently, collecting what I could in the early hours when Evan was out for his run. My clothes went into black garbage bags because I didn't have enough suitcases left. My toiletries were stuffed into a cardboard box from the recycling pile. The things too big to carry, the bookshelf, the bed frame, the dining table, I left behind. I couldn't face asking anyone for help. The apartment looked hollow when I was done, though most of my belongings were still technically inside. That was the cruelest part. The space still had my fingerprints all over it, but it had stopped being mine weeks ago. When I left, I didn't lock the door. I didn't even close it all the way. I just pulled it until it clicked and walked down the hall, past the spot where I'd first seen them carrying in Evan's mattress. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, another reminder that things were already being remade without me. I took the train to a small, run-down sublet I'd found online. It wasn't much. Peeling wallpaper, a window that didn't close all the way. But at least the keys were in my name. That night, lying on a lumpy twin mattress, I finally let myself think about Liam. Not the Liam who had plotted all of this, but the version I'd met, the one who laughed too loudly in restaurants, who remembered my coffee order, who kissed my temple when I was reading on the couch. And I thought about Evan. Not in the way everyone assumed, not as some secret crush I'd been pining for. But I couldn't deny it. When I'd made that stupid joke, a part of me had meant it. Not because I wanted him, but because I wanted Liam to react, to fight for me, to feel, just for once, that fear of losing someone. Instead, he'd let me go. No, he'd made sure I left. And the worst part was, he'd won. The joke I'd thrown like a dart had ricocheted back at me, sharper than I'd ever expected. In the weeks that followed, the story didn't die. The video kept circulating, reposted in new places with captions that got meaner over time. People I barely knew messaged to say they'd heard what happened. My name became shorthand for self-inflicted humiliation. I didn't try to defend myself anymore. The truth, that it had started as one careless sentence, that I'd been half joking, half testing him, wasn't something anyone wanted to hear. They liked their version better, the reckless girlfriend who got replaced by the guy she'd chosen, in her own words. Sometimes, in the quiet of my new place, I caught myself replaying it all. Not the moment I spoke, not the laughter, not the moving boxes, but the split second after Liam heard me say it, the look in his eyes. Not anger, not hurt, just a decision being made. And I missed him. God help me, I missed him. Even after what he'd done, even after losing my home, my friends, my dignity. There was a part of me that wished I'd kept my mouth shut, swallowed the joke, and let us limp along a little longer. Because the truth no one knew, the part I'll never admit out loud, is that I didn't just lose to Evan. I lost to Liam. And I don't think I'll ever stop wondering if that was exactly what he wanted from the start.